What's up, guys? Justin Morgan here, Carved Up Vegan Muscle, and this video is looking at accessory movements that I do. Now, I had done some videos talking about the squat every day, the Bulgarian method, and at the heart of the Bulgarian method, it is extremely sport specific. So the Bulgarian weightlifting team that I mentioned in the past when I talked about like squatting every day and that kind of thing, which I'm a big fan of, but they would essentially squat and then they would do clean and jerk and snatch, and that was largely what it is known for. Now, I will say that like when I've listened to like Max Aida and people that actually trained with Coach Ivan Abizhov in Bulgaria, they said there was more variation. It wasn't just that. It's kind of been a little bit exaggerated. But the heart of the program is that it is extremely sport specific, that it is you primarily do those movements and those movements alone. And then what separates out some of like the Russian method or the Chinese method is that there's a lot more accessory movements that get worked into it. And even though I am a big fan of the high frequency lifting paradigm that is advocated by that, I do use more accessory movements. I don't just squat. Now, you could say I kind of just squat most of the time because I'm doing variations of the squat, but it's still the squat. So, I'll do a high bar squat, and I really prefer the high bar squat. Yeah, I can do a little bit more weight with the low bar squat, and I'm not saying I'll never use that again for anything, but I'm just not a fan of it. I don't like it that much, even if I do use more weight from it while doing it. So even in competition in the future, I might still just decide to use the high bar squat, narrow stance, the way that you would typically think of an Olympic weightlifter doing it, because I prefer it that way. But so a pause squat would be a variation of the squat. You can do it for varying lengths of time. What I try to do that's easy to get into is that you can't just do like a pause squat and rest in the bottom while keeping your body kind of at least upright, but it's better if you actually stay flexed and keep the muscles contracted in that position and then fire out of the hole, as opposed to just resting your legs at the bottom in the hole and doing it that way. But either one, they're both pause squats. It's just a little bit different way to kind of look at it. So that's obviously an accessory movement I do for the squat. Another variation might be the front squat. I don't really do a ton of front squats. I throw it in occasionally, and I'll keep it in for maybe 2-3 weeks, and then I get kind of tired of it. It really doesn't have a huge amount of carryover to powerlifting. It does replicate some of the aspects of Atlas stone loading when you're talking about strongman and some of the other aspects of that I compete in, but that would kind of be, it's more in that area as opposed to like carry over to the squat for powerlifting. Then another variation, one that I throw in that I don't really do enough that I should do is the Zercher squat. Zercher squat's where you kind of hold the bar in you cradle it in your arms and you squat with the bar here. It's like a front squat in that it's front loaded, but you're just holding it differently. That also has more carryover to strongman, but I've seen some people say that it really carried over well to their deadlift. For powerlifting, I'm really not entirely sure how that works. I'm sure it could carry over some to your deadlift. Kind of doubt that it's going to carry over quite as much as just doing a deadlift or another accessory of the deadlift, but that's just what people say. I don't know that I entirely agree with it. Anyway, so the other things that I do when we're looking at like the push press, obviously, actually log press is the movement. When I work on overhead pressing, it's because I want it to carry over to my log press. So one thing that I do for that is push press. I just uploaded a video a few days ago of me doing a 245-pound push press. I wanted to try to get that up into the mid-200s before I went back to focusing on bench press, which I did. And now I'll be spending several weeks on vacation, so I don't know what my strength will be like when I get back, but probably won't have changed very much. So Then, so like push press, log press, and then bench pressing I still keep in there because it also has some carryover. All pressing movements will have some degree of carryover to other pressing movements, even if it's just very minimal amounts that take more practice to find ways to integrate it back into. So that's for the strict press. Obviously, well, that's for the log press. Strict press also would be another variation that you could put in there. So I use those variations to carry over to that. Now, when we're talking about bench pressing, push press could be a variation that you could do that would carry over to the bench press, but more specifically, you could do close grip bench presses or floor presses. And then I like to do, aside from just regular pause bench, you could do touch and go bench or the ballistic style bench press where people bring the bar down and like kind of bounce it off your chest. That would be a variation of the bench press. Unfortunately, a lot of people that say they're power lifters will use that as their primary form of benching. Unfortunately, in powerlifting, there is no such thing as a touch and go or a ballistic style bench press. So those would be kind of the primary ways that you would look at doing accessory movements for the bench press. Then for the deadlift, accessory movements that I do are stiff leg deadlifts, deadlifts off a deficit, and then pause deadlifts. So you can pause off the floor, so you pick it up just a few inches off the floor, pause, stay in position, then finish the lift. I personally bring it up to just below my knees, pause below my knee, because that is my weakest part in the deadlift, and then finish the movement. So as far as powerlifting goes, if we're talking specifically about powerlifting, those are kind of the 3 different variations of the deadlift that I do aside from doing regular deadlifts. So that kind of covers a lot of variations of the squat, bench press, deadlift, and then I even threw in some overhead pressing things. So even though I am a fan of the high frequency, high intensity kind of style of lifting, when we are referring to doing Bulgarian style method, I have never done anything with that. Bulgarian style training, involves multiple maxes per day, every day, and it really is mostly only if you've studied under Coach Ivan Abizhov, which, I haven't done. So, even though I'm a fan of implementing some of those concepts, that's obviously not what I do. And when most people say that they do Bulgarian style method, they didn't study with Ivan Abizhov either. So, unless you've been under his watchful eye and followed some of those kind of practices, it's really hard to... I can see where people say, I followed the Bulgarian method and either had this result or that result or whatever, and they're just, they lack that kind of sage wisdom that they might get from that. Plus, well, I'll leave that for another video. I'll talk to you guys in the next one. You take it easy.